Welcome once again to another episode of Crazy Canuck Truckin'. Thank you to everybody who watches and listens and shares and talks about it. And I hope that everybody is having a great time, great season coming up of holidays and having fun with family. So without further ado, please listen to the second episode of Loren McNabb with me. Thank you.
Yeah, I am the kind of person that I like direct answers. I probably couldn't be a journalist and interview a politician because politician would probably say, I'm never going to talk to that guy again
Well,
because he
like
keeps asking me the same question.
the answers are never simple, and I get that, right?
Right.
I
Yes.
understand that it's not always a yes and no, but sometimes it is just a yes or no, right?
Yes.
Are we
Yeah.
putting more money into this? Shouldn't be a 2-minute answer, right? Like, so I don't know. As I've said, David, you couldn't pay me to be a politician, so I tried hard to have respect for most that are in that line of work, but it's not easy times for them right now. If you and I think we get hit with opinions, whew.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy to become a politician. And I'm glad there are people that are willing to take that on. But I remember a friend of mine or an acquaintance. She was going for the nomination in her area, and she would have killed it. But the amount, yeah, she was going up against somebody that had really deep pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And even though she was more articulate, and I mean, I can be a little biased, but she was definitely better. The guy's a decent enough guy. He ended up winning his riding and everything, but I said to her, like, you know what you're going to be in for, right? You know, everybody's going to be shooting arrows at you. And she's like, I know, but I feel like I need to at least give it a shot.
I respect
and I admire
that. Good for her. Good for anyone. Like I said, like I think most people get into everything with the best of intentions, and it doesn't always work out that way. But then once you're in it, you discover how hard it might be, or you're just hammered day in, day out with someone yelling, "Fix this already!" Right?
Yeah.
And you're like, it's not easy to fix all these issues in the world right now. Not any of them.
I know, like that's what I love about the background I have in trucking. You know, I've been in almost every position in trucking, except accounting.
Mm-hmm.
Been the owner, been the check bangle, the lowly person doing sweeping floors, whatever, right? Everything in between, except accounting. And you know, it's so easy for so many drivers. Things are so black and white. Well, we should do this or we should do that. When I buy a truck, I'm gonna buy a truck like this and like that. I'm like, no, you probably won't. Well, yes, I would. You know, like it's way better to do this, you know, and that. And I'm like, you want to know the real reason why, you know? And there's so many things behind that. I love that I have that experience because when decisions get made, I can turn around and look at it from their point of view, or so I have a lot more empathy for.
You should be in management then, David.
I was.
That's not easy though either, right? Because I think people always say to their managers, and I'm guilty of this, well, you don't know what I'm talking about, or you haven't lived what I'm living, or you haven't been through this. And then I know people who step into the management role who kind of have all these great backgrounds, and then you get in there and you think, I actually can't fix this the way I thought I was going to be able to fix this, right?
Yeah. No, there's so many things in the background that people have no idea. I want to get to, you know, you and I went for a ride. And I tell you, this one instance with you, Loren, really has colored my view of you.
Uh-oh.
So you are coming to the place I was working and driving along the perimeter in Winnipeg, and there's no right-hand turn lane, and you come off of a road that's doing 100K onto a little side street, onto the frontage road, and you were telling me afterwards, that's crazy how this is here. There's no right turning lane, and you were debating, like, do I pull on the shoulder? Do I stay in my lane? Because legally I need to stay in my lane and not pull on the shoulder and take the service exit, right? So few people know that. They just assume that they'll just ride on the shoulder. Anyway, the knowledge you have and the smarts you had about driving, I was like, yeah, I'll take her for a ride. And
you wouldn't let me drive the truck, though.
Well, I wanted to show off.
That was really great about that day is that the chance to we sit in the studio a lot, and whenever we can get out and speak with people like in their element, it's so much more important. But
yeah,
when I think about, we talked about the way people are judgy or the opinions that they have of others. And I think truck drivers get lumped into all sorts of categories. You're going too fast. You only care about the bottom line. You're just trying to get your load in. You're probably all asleep at the wheel. There's all these misconceptions and perceptions. And then I got in that truck with you and I thought, my God, that the way your head was like on a swivel, checking the mirror, checking this, checking your speed. You have all your equipment in there. And, it's like the whole point of life is to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And I didn't drive, and we didn't change loads, and we didn't do anything like that. I understand, but just to be at that height and that powerful machine and have all these cars whipping around you, not paying attention, that perspective was super valuable. Have they fixed that service road yet? By the way, is it still like that out there?
There's been a bunch of changes there.
Okay.
And you can't. It changed a whole bunch of times in the last couple of years.
Well, they made all those announcements, right? What they were going to do on the perimeter. So that might have been part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they took out the left turn lane coming across the highway was gone a long time ago already.
Right.
Because there's people killed right at that intersection where you were.
Yeah.
Multiple people over the years. It was a dangerous place. So yeah, they've fixed up a lot of stuff there, and it's a lot better. It's tough sometimes when engineers look at studies from Europe and think that they can apply that here in Canada.
Oh, you don't like the roundabout? Is that what I'm thinking?
Oh, I love roundabouts.
Oh, okay.
I love roundabouts.
That's a pretty European thing, but I find them quite effective in lots of locations.
In lots of locations they are, like the problem with the one there at Oak Bluff was that the original design, you could hardly get a truck around it. And they said, well, it works in many other jurisdictions for the amount of truck traffic. And my former boss and Terry Shaw from the MTA, he's no longer there, but they went to Manitoba Highways and said, what are you doing? This isn't going to work. And then, well, it's only like small number of trucks that come through there a day. You're going to reroute everything now from 3 major highways through this roundabout because of what you want, the changes you want to do. You can't take the data just from traffic today. Because it's going to change drastically the way you're changing the traffic. So now you're going to have, I think it went from 30 trucks a day to like 150 trucks a day going around that roundabout. And a lot of them are oversized loads. And the way it was going to be built, this was like a month before they were going to put shovels in the ground. And it's not going to work. You won't get the oversized loads around there. And they were like, well, we can do 1 or 2 a day. That's not a big deal. Well, there's oversized companies, oversized haulers just down the road. It's not going to work. And to their credit, Manitoba Highways went back to the drawing board really quick.
Yeah.
And the end result is something you can get around with a truck fairly easily.
Now, doesn't that make you feel better in the end? I appreciate that maybe the thought wasn't there at the start, but that happens in a lot of things, right? And there's nothing more frustrating when someone on the front line of any industry goes to someone and says, sorry, have you thought about A, B, or C? And they don't listen. I mean, like maybe the moral in some respects is that at the very least at the end, it made more sense, correct?
Yeah, but the problem nowadays so often is people want to complain instead of actually going to the people
right.
that
Go
need
to the
to
table.
hear.
Let's sit down at the table and I'm going to
Yeah.
show you why this isn't going to work, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what they did.
Superhuman. What is the saying? And we used to say this in our family. I'm trying to remember who used to say this, but speak up, not out.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that people like to just, like get mad about and tell this person, everybody I'm mad, but they don't go to the people. And I'm not saying they're always above you, but the people who can actually make a difference, too often, and I'm sure I've done this before, I've not told the boss or I've not gone to the head of whatever and said, can we just talk about this and why it won't work? But I'll be mad, or that person will be mad. You're just vomiting out your anger as opposed to taking it to the right person, right?
Truck drivers are pretty good at complaining. And
everybody is. I don't know if it's just your industry.
I've had so many drivers come up to me and complain about something. I say, have you talked to somebody that can make a difference?
That's right.
Well, no, they're not going to listen.
Yes.
Well, how do you know?
And it's so human to be like that, but it's a good reminder right now, and especially in this moment when we're having all these pretty serious conversations these days, right? About what are we going to do about crime and what are we going to do with our hospitals, and I could sit there and be complained that something took too long, or I was worried about my safety, or am I going to be part of the solution?
Yeah.
And I don't know if me just complaining about it on the airwaves as being part of the solution, but at least it's, having a conversation is good.
Yeah. I really feel like you guys especially are head and shoulders above so many other people. It's just interesting. You're all three together. When you have your opinions, you're very well thought out and amazing opinions, and your knowledge base. How did you get so smart on so many topics?
Well, I'm not. I've often said, and it's kind of a thing about what you do for a living, is that you know a little about a lot, but not necessarily a lot about very specific things. And so sometimes there's themes that will stick. Like if you really have deep beliefs in one type of solution, then that might work for all sorts of conversations. But no, there's a ton of things that I will be learning on the fly. And I've admitted on air, when we're talking finances or mortgages and those kinds of things, like I'm 45 years old and still Googling certain terms before I go into it to make sure I have it right. And sometimes you get it wrong, David, right? You just do. And so that's why it's better to bring, I'm not going to talk to you about trucking today. The trucker is going to talk about trucking today, right? Because I'm not the one that knows. So that's a nice compliment, but I think there are a lot of days that the good news is that we have different backgrounds, and maybe that helps, with different areas of knowledge, but I wouldn't say expertise.
Well, maybe it's the humility of knowing what you know and what you don't know. And sometimes you don't even know enough to know the questions to ask, but I think that's a good trait to have, that you're not just going to take everything and pretend to be an expert. And so I've heard you say, I don't know much about this, and you're learning along with the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that, because there are some people that pretend that they know everything about everything and you can't tell them anything. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of hard to hear that from an anchor or from a news media person, right?
Oh, well, my husband or kids might say I'm a know-it-all sometimes, but I don't know. While you're saying that, it makes me wonder, like, when we were talking earlier about politicians and just answering the questions or not, would you prefer a politician who then just says, you know what, like, I don't know. Good question. I will see if I can get you the answer. Or would that bug you? Because sometimes I just think even at the highest positions, it would be okay to say, you know what? Good point. We're looking into it. Or I don't know. I don't know if that would then result in that being said all the time, which you wouldn't want either, but maybe we could all use a bit more of that.
There's people that use that as an excuse not to answer a question.
Yeah.
But I appreciate, like, it's different. You know, you have somebody that can be speaking about a lot of things, and then you come up with a different question for them, and they're like, yeah, like you said, good point. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Mm-hmm.
If that person gets back to you on that,
great,
and they address that,
yeah,
well, yeah, then the respect in my mind goes up even more, because they haven't just brushed it off. So yeah, I would prefer somebody to say, I don't know. I'll find out and I'll get back to you. And I know some of your guests that you guys have had on, I've heard that comment, and I've heard the follow-up on that as well sometimes. And that's pretty cool. You know that.
Yeah. And then you get it back the next day, right? Like, so I think sometimes we have to give people more credit, because if, say, you're running a multi-billion-dollar business, which I know government's not business, but they're working with billions of dollars, I cannot possibly expect them to understand, to off the top of their head know where every single cent is going or how it works, right? But sometimes, you know, the yes or the no is okay too for an answer. Correct. Yeah. Yes. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate a little more directness.
Yeah. And sometimes we need to ask the question more directly too, right? Because that needs to be saying, yes, what are you saying? Why are you saying it that way?
I've had some trouble with that. With myself personally, trying to ask questions. I heard another news person say, ask the question, shut up and get out of the way.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a lot of, I used to listen to one person that interviewed people all the time in racing. And they asked questions that took them like 3 or 4 minutes to get out.
Right.
And it was just like, come on, just let them answer the question, you know?
Sometimes I think that's because the person doesn't necessarily know how they're getting to the question. And so that's sort of like their mind is going. Sometimes I think it's, you know, a person can be guilty of a bit of an ego thing, and they're trying to show, you know, this is what I know, and then I'm going to ask you a question. And maybe sometimes it's a bit of both. I've certainly been guilty of knowing what I wanted to ask, but not sure how to say it the best possible way. And so you might take a little longer to get there. And all of a sudden your brain goes, right, this is how you wanted to ask it. And sometimes it can be really sensitive. You're trying hard to ask a question that might be so personal, and you're trying to think to yourself, should I go here? You know, is that fair? And how can I do this in the kindest possible way? It's an ever evolving skill. I will never be good at it. Someday I'm 90.
Yeah. On my last podcast, I asked my guest, Parker, what it's like to lose a daughter. And I felt as comfortable as I could feel asking that, but it's still a tough question to ask somebody. How do you feel about losing your daughter? You know, and edit out, very, very little is edited out. And his one comment is just, you're not going to like what I'm going to say. You know, but he's a very straight and direct kind of person.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to get an answer, something like that. And so, and that's what I wanted. I wanted his direct answer, because not everybody's going to be touchy-feely. Not everybody's going to be, you know, there's all kinds of different approaches to the same thing,
and
right?
There's different. I think too that's really good of you to recognize that, because there's no formula for your feelings, right? And sometimes the answer might surprise the person asking the question, and sometimes I think it surprises the person who's responding, because maybe in that moment what they're thinking might not have even been how they felt 5 minutes ago, right? Because it's particularly, I would think, with loss, man, that is a roller coaster.
I think you have to know the person you're talking to before I ask some questions like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like just, and I didn't know him. I didn't know him very well. Okay, I've never met him, but anyway, it worked out. I just felt that he was going to be very direct, and he was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really cool. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
I thought of 2 questions here.
Okay.
I told you I don't usually do any preparation. We just have a conversation.
Sure.
From the time you went into Carleton to
Mm-hmm.
start studying, and now looking back over your career in media, journalism, TV, radio, all the stuff that you've done, what is something that has surprised you the most? What aspect of the job has been something that surprised you the most? See there, I didn't know how to ask the question.
No, that's fair. Oh, that's a good question. I think it's kind of like a twofold thing. I've been surprised every time I end up in some situation, and I mean, it might be like the earthquake in Haiti or the earthquake in Pakistan, or you're covering things in Afghanistan, and you're sometimes seeing some really awful things. The weird feeling of gratefulness surprised me, like how grateful you are to people in some of their lowest moments, probably their lowest moment, the lowest moment of their life, when they want to talk to you. And I can't get over how I'm almost surprised, like even now on air, on radio, people who want to come on and speak about some of these really terrible things or issues, but they're like, no, it's okay. Like, I want to share. And you just think, I don't know if I were in your shoes, I'd be willing to open up my heart or my home like that. And so I've been supremely grateful, like shocked sometimes, that someone was willing to say, yes, please, I'll come show you where my house fell down, and underneath the rubble, there's a child's hand poking through, like some really awful things. And yet they're still opening up their hearts. And I think I'm still surprised, but also grateful, to use the same word, David. I had said years ago, I would have to quit my job if I ever stopped feeling, like if I got to that moment and wasn't a little bit emotional or pushing away the tears. And I think now I'm surprised about how often maybe even more so now, I'm ready to just have a good cry with like whoever it is, because, when you started off journalism, it was all about objectivity, right? You're going into the story and you're going to be objective, but at the end of the day, you're a human being listening to somebody. And it doesn't mean your tears means you side with what they're saying or you're thinking about them. It just means in that moment, man, you're feeling it. And I think I cry more now in some interviews than I maybe even did 20 years ago. So it's a hard question to answer, because just along the way, I cannot tell you how many times I just think, man, thank you. Like I could send thank you cards out to 15,000 people and it wouldn't be enough for the number of stories and faces and names that have willingly shared a ton with me.
That's an amazing answer.
I don't know if it was an answer again, but as I'm moving through it, I just think I even get teary thinking about certain scenes. But I think, man, I'm glad I still feel those things, because I never want to get to the point where you're so jaded that you're like, well, throw your hands up in the air, right?
I started feeling that emotion from you now. So that is amazing, and not something I would take lightly, that you have that perspective of the people you're talking to. That's and showing those tears, showing the emotion is, I love seeing that, because that I was present at an interview, somebody that lost greatly, huge, and the interviewer was more concerned afterwards that some of her hair was sticking up a little bit than what had actually been said. And she thought that would ruin the shot.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it with your thoughts on that one, because that's it's sometimes, I suppose it's hard to be present, but like when I talk about gratefulness, my dog's back in here. Okay. We've had listeners who called in, and you were there that day when someone had been through something really awful in their family, and they were sharing in that moment their loss. And that listener and their family still texts us and calls me regularly to update me on their life. And so you just, you're hoping in that moment that you do it right by them. I do not always get it right. And I'm sure there are people out there who think that in an interview, I did not get it right with them. And however somebody walks away is how they walk away. And I have to own that, right? Like, because I certainly haven't always gotten it right. But then there's those times when people will connect back, and it's so crazy when someone's sharing something terrible, when they call you up to say thank you, and you think, my God, like, no,
thank you.
But
yeah,
I get, at the end of the day, you're all just human about it.
Yeah. Thanks. That is such a great perspective. Here's the second question.
Okay.
What is something that you wish that regular people knew about people in the news media business?
That I do not have an agenda. Like it's like the question that you get asked, well, what's your angle or what's your agenda? And for sure, you are bringing certain guests on to answer specific questions, right? Like the hospital wait times are out of control. So I'm going to be asking you questions about how many people are on the surgical wait list. How long do you think it's going to take to cut back? So my angle is about surgeries, but I'm not ever, there's no agenda to make someone look bad or to try to, attack a system. It's really just asking questions and hopefully getting some answers. And so I think there's this perception like, oh, well, they were trying to do that or wanted it to go that way. And I would say, I can't think of an example where you walked into the room and said, I'm only going to talk about this and not about anything else, right? Because the answers are what you react to. So I think I would like it if people understood that, when we call someone in the morning and we're talking to them, for sure we want answers to how much it's going to cost and when will the program be up and running. But I don't have an agenda to make someone look good or bad.
We have so many labels that we like to attach even to news media, right?
and I'm sure someone will listen to this, David, and say, yeah, right. And then they'll point to an example where maybe it seemed clear to them that I did have an agenda. It's not a perfect system, but for the most part, particularly on radio, we're just looking to get some answers and have conversations with people, right? And it'll take you places. I remember listening, I was not working I was doing Connecting Winnipeg a couple of weeks ago, and I was listening to Brett and Greg, and they interviewed this owner of a business. And it was supposed to be this kind of like, he's doing this fundraiser. Come on and talk to us about the fundraiser. Well, about 2 or 3 questions in, he just off the cuff says, sorry, I'm having kind of a rough morning. Been broken into twice today. And then Greg or Brett, one of them says, sorry, like someone broke into your restaurant twice already this morning. He's like, yep, once at 5 o'clock, once at 8 o'clock. Well, next thing you know, you're talking questions. The interview goes a whole other space. And so, that it's supremely organic, right? Like,
yeah.
Again, I'm sure somebody is giving me one of these right now once this part goes to air with the non-agenda, but I like to think it's true for the most part.
I'll share my little personal experience, recent experience with that. With the Freedom Convoy and the people I freelance for in trucking, freelance right for, they didn't want to be answering questions. They pushed a lot of their interviews out to myself or somebody else. So I was interviewed by Fox in the States on camera, CBC, a couple of different shows on CBC. You guys interviewed me, radio down south and stuff like that. It's funny, after I did the Fox, I told one of my buddies that I was on Fox, and he got upset. He says, Dave, they're the enemy. I'm like, why are they the enemy? Well, they're so right wing and they're never right. And they're, all this stuff. And we have these biases. It's just ridiculous. And in my mind, I thought I would have the hardest time with CBC. And I didn't. I ended up on CBC 3 different times. Nobody else. I didn't do that many interviews with anybody else. There's others that I did 2 interviews with, over the time and whatnot. But it was very interesting that, in my mind, the one I thought I would have the most trouble with was no trouble at all. And
so there, and that's interesting too, because so there your friend is making an assumption about the one broadcaster. Yeah. You're making an assumption about the other, and none of it ends up the way you think it's going to. And with that, I think I will say, like, there are for sure certain publications or people that I think have opinions that are certainly not in line with my own, and I might not like their journalistic integrity. But you do try really hard to dabble in different spaces, right? Because it's the same way every once in a while, the listener who I think is, oh my gosh, they're out to lunch. Sometimes every once in a while they say something that you think, so do I want to completely ignore the person that I think is out to lunch, or every once in a while, listen in? Sometimes you have to cut certain people out, and you got to cut certain noise out because it's wrong. Sometimes it's wrong, but every once in a while, those out of field positions or opinions, you never know. Yeah.
Normally I would ask about a favorite road trip sometime, but we'll have to save that for another time since we're getting short of time.
I'll have to think about that, because I will say this, my favorite road trips over the years, for work at least, aren't necessarily the ones that have taken me to the best places. It's, where you're in the back of a van sleeping with your crew, or you're in a hotel room with no water, or you're like in an earthquake zone, shaking out of your bed in an aftershock, but you're together with your crew. So none of it it's the chips that taste like gasoline, or the 6 days of granola bars, or whatever, right? Like, it's the fun stuff. It's kind of like when you go camping with your kids or with your family, like the whole 5 days might have been kind of a nightmare, but the nightmare is actually what made it fun,
Yeah. And you did meet your husband away from here, right?
So no, actually, we grew up together. So
did you? Okay. Yeah. So right. Yeah.
We're both from Minnesota, and so we knew each other and we were together through high school. And then when I went away to school, we kind of just went our separate ways. Yeah. And then right before Israel, kind of started talking again. And
I knew it was something to do with Israel.
Well, he did come with me eventually, like to live over there, which was a whole new experience for him too. So again, like the people that you thought would never have taken that leap with you, he was the first one to do it, right? So
nice.
It's awesome.
Nice. That's awesome. He's a great guy. I've met him. He's pretty cool.
We'll have to talk about your family next time. Bring me back and we'll just talk family.
Oh, we could go on. I really appreciate you coming on, Loren.
Thank you.
You and Greg and Brett are some of my favorite people.
Well, you're one of ours. We always, and sorry to interrupt, I just, it goes much stronger our way for, I don't know if we always agreed, David, and we probably won't again. But that doesn't, mean we can't try to have a healthy discourse, right? So
it would be sad if we all thought the same way all the time. Well, we learn so much more by listening to other people and trying to see, well, maybe I am just crazy.
Maybe we're all crazy.
Yeah. Thanks a lot to everybody that's been watching and listening, and hope that you can like and share and give us some ratings, try to bump us up a little bit, and appreciate everybody being on here. And thank you, Loren. It's been really good coming on and being on the other side of the desk, so to speak, I guess, this time, being interviewed.
I'll have to learn to shorten my